Good morning. Thank you for joining me for another 5 good minutes with the Word. I'm Barry Bryson. We're continuing our study, which I'm entitling Recommended Reading. And starting with Genesis, and we're going to work our way through the Bible. This is quite arbitrary on my part. And I've chosen books of the Bible and sections inside books of the Bible that I want to recommend that you read, but read in a certain way. And I want to begin with the book of Genesis today. Genesis is a book of origins, and it is. It is the book of origins for the universe, but not just for the universe, because the universe is not the point. The universe is the habitat God builds for us. And God made a universe, and then He made a garden planet, a Goldilocks planet for us to live on, and then on that planet, He made a garden specifically to put the man and the woman that He would create. We are the point. And so Genesis, which is a book of origins, is really a book about our origins, and not just our origins as individuals, but as God's children and as family. The book of Genesis really is a domestic book, even in the early chapters, not chapter 1, chapter 2 so much, although those are really birth narratives. They're creation accounts. Neither Adam nor Eve were born, they were created and made. They were not just created, but they were made. They were fashioned by God personally, which means that we're not like anything else in all the universe. Everything else God spoke into existence, but not the man and not the woman. God personally, hands on, if I can be anthropomorphic for a minute, but literally fashioned. That's the word the Genesis uses, the man and the woman. But even beginning in chapter 3 with the first sin, we have a domestic story, which starts out where God is the Father and we are, as His creations, are His children. And when you read the account of Adam and Eve and the way they hide themselves from God, and He's looking for them in the cool of the day, and you read that whole account, which we won't take the time to do today, in chapter 3, and He's dealing with them, it's like a parent talking to a toddler, you know. Why did you hide? I was naked. Who told you you were naked? and then, and then Adam makes an excuse. The woman you gave me, and she said, the serpent lied to me, and then there has to be consequences. And so God, as father of these two people, metes out consequences and then continues to care for them because He makes clothing for them, and continues to care for them, even though there has to be consequences for their actions. And we see this even more strongly in chapter 4 in the story of Cain and Abel, where they bring their offering to God. Abel brings his best. Cain just brings something. These are very early days in the history, the earliest days in the history of humanity. Probably only one animal, the sheep, has been domesticated at all. And so agriculture is just barely subsistence agriculture. The Bible makes that clear. And God, in some way, shows that He approves of Abel's offering and not Cain's. And Cain gets all, you know, um, upset about that and gets very cross and petulant. And God says, and talks to him the way a father would 11, 12, 13-year-old son. And God metaphorically, puts His arm around him and says to him, Cain, this is not about me, and it's not about your brother. This is about you. And be careful that you don't wallow in this. Sin is waiting at the door like a predatory beast, ready to pounce on you. But if you choose to, you can overcome this. And God talks to him the way a father would talk to his son. It's almost like those old lifesaver commercials, where at the end of the commercial, the dad would say to the kid, "Do you need a lifesaver?" It just reminds me of that moment does. It's a very domestic moment between a father and a son. But in this case, the father isn't Adam, the father is God. And in fact, the rest, that's why the genealogies are so important. We have Adam through Noah, Noah to Abraham, and then the rest of the book, beginning in verse 12, is specifically about Abraham's family. And over the course of the rest of the book, we get to see patterns of behavior, destructive behavior repeated, but also faith handed down from generation to generation. people deal with infertility, sibling rivalry, um, um, just treating each other badly, but also loving each other and sacrificing for each other, missing home when you're away, um, um, you know, um, making a bad mistake when you find yourself a widow, the way Judah did, and lonely. We find out some things. We find out that even though God permitted um, polygamy, it was never part of His plan, and it never works. If you don't believe that, read the book of Genesis. Or the rest of the Bible, but it's strongly there in the book of Genesis, and we really get to know these folks. We just finished the study Matriarchs, where we talked about the women whose characters are just so fully realized in the book of Genesis, but we know them within the context of family. Sarah, Rebecca, Rachel, Hagar, Tamar. We know these women in the context of their families. And there are so many small moments that are just family moments. Like Jacob saying, "Why are you guys sitting around looking at each other? Go to Egypt, and buy us some food." We can't because the guy said, "Bring your little brother." Well, why did you tell him you had a little brother? Well, we didn't know he was going to ask. It's just the way people talk. And I want to give you one more example before we close, and that's from Genesis 27. And we know about about Jacob and Esau and Isaac and Rebekah. Isaac preferred Esau, for selfish reasons, even though everyone knew Jacob was the one, and Rebecca preferred Jacob for selfish reasons, but also good reasons, and of course they sin and deceive Isaac, and Jacob has to be sent away, and Esau, who has never valued the covenant, never valued anything that attaches itself to the covenant, and who continues to marry foreign wives, you know, um, has brought these foreign wives into the household. And after Jacob and Rebekah scheme with each other and dupe Isaac, the end of the story is this. Rebekah says to Isaac, "I am tired of living because of the daughters of Heth. If Jacob takes a wife from the daughters of Heth like these, from the daughters of the land, what good shall my life be?" So Isaac called Jacob and blessed him and charged him and said, "You shall not take a wife from the daughters of Canaan." And he sends him back to Laban. It's like Rebekah is reminding Isaac, "Listen, buddy, you may be angry at me, but your favorite doesn't care squat about any of this. And these foreign wives are killing me, and they're killing you too. So you better protect Jacob because he's the one that the covenant is going to be coming through." And so he does. You know, it's just such a perfect moment. It's the wife saying to the husband, "Don't you start with me. Don't you say I told you so. Don't you do it. Don't you start with me. You know what Esau has already done." I love it. It's just it's 4,000 years plus. Well, 4,000 years ish ago, and yet it's exactly the way families are, because Genesis is a book of family stories. It's like a family album. It is a book of domestic stories. It's not really. There is a battle in it, and there's some detail about that battle, but still, it's not about kings so much or battles, or it's about a family just living their lives. They're rich, they're poor, they're on the run. It's about everything that happens to this family, and that's the way I'm asking you to read it. So pick up Genesis again and think about it as a family album. Think about it as an origin story of all families, and look at it as a book of wisdom about families, which show us bad behavior and the way bad patterns get handed down the generation, but also the way faith gets handed down the generations and the way faith can survive. Well, that's my recommended reading for today. Next time we are together, we want to talk about the book of Ruth. So thank you for that. We'll talk about her next time in that book. And thank you for joining me today.